are the last and final day of the West Virginia rifle season. It's been a good year. It's been a good year in general. I had 2 good bow kills this year, both of which were Pope and young deer. And I've got out a little bit here during the rifle season. I was still carrying my bow with me. I did not pack the rifle this year, even though you're wearing the orange vest. I'm still packing the bow. I missed a good opportunity. Honestly, I missed a chip shot there just a few days ago. We had some snow on, and it was really everything that a bow hunter would dream of. Picturesque, lots of deer movement, got some good activity. One of the 2 shooters at this particular spot showed up 18 yards, and I blew it. Complete chip shot, great footage, and I just didn't do my part. So the snow is now melted off. It's a few days later, and the second of the 2 shooters that I was after, actually the number 1 deer at this particular stand, was there in daylight last night. And of course, he was there, I wasn't. It seems like that's the way it goes sometimes, but nonetheless, here we are. It is the last day of the gun season here in West Virginia, and I'm going back in. I made a grocery run earlier today about noon. I dropped a little 50-pound bag of corn there in front of the camera. There's already deer activity there. It is 3:08. I'm getting just a little bit of a late start getting in there. We got just about a 2.5 hour sit before dark. Well, actually, by the time I get there, it'll be about a 2-hour sit. So nonetheless, we're going to get in there and take one final swing for the season before the late season kicks off. 1 tag left to fill. And if either one of those deer, preferably the big wide 8, if he makes a cameo appearance this evening and I get the opportunity to throw one his way, I'm going to do exactly that. So stick with us. We got just a few minutes to get ready, and we'll be in the stand. Hi, we're back at the truck. It's quite the little hike out here. You can hear the coyotes carried on there. And, well, we made it happen right there at last light. I didn't think it was going to. We were flat covered up with deer tonight. Man, it makes it tough when you're solo filming. But, nonetheless, we got an arrow in him. And the blood looks pretty decent, honestly. He was quartering to me just a little bit. Blood looks pretty decent, but I went 50 or 60 yards and that arrow is still in him. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to back out and make some phone calls, get April on board, maybe Seth, Jeremy, somebody. But we're going to give him just a little bit of time to go grab something to eat. And where those coyotes are carried on there, just kind of hope maybe they don't find him before we do. You recording? Mm-hmm. All right, guys, we're back. Got Jeremy Moore with me. He made the mistake of answering the phone this evening. He volunteered for some tracking duty. And anyways, we put about 40-50 yards into it. Initially still had blood. The arrow's still in this deer. So we put 40-50 yards into it. And I thought, you know what, I better check the footage. It's probably good that I did. It's not a perfect shot. I think I actually missed the heart just a little bit, but we'll see. I have two different distinct blood here. You know, there's some dark blood in areas and there's some real light colored spray type blood. Clearly we got two different things going on inside this animal. But, if we find him, we'll see what the broadhead did.
There he is. There's the white belly.
White belly.
Wow. Now I know why you called me to come help you.
Hey, Mama didn't raise no fool. Never did find the arrow, did you?
No, I didn't see it.
I'd say it took that heart out.
It almost had to have.
That's stellar deer. Huh. Look at the bases on that jewel.
Heavy.
Heavy deer, bladed brow. Terrible G3 there. Just a really underdeveloped. But look at the mass on that jewel.
Heavy.
Huh. Well, I guess we didn't technically have to back out. You know, that's a... Ouch. Well, guys, this is a pretty stellar way to close out the West Virginia whitetail season. I actually missed this filthy creature on Tuesday of this week. I think it was Tuesday, in that snow. He put on a show, come in, worked the licking branch, scrape, and just put on a show, chasing some other deer around. And I missed a chip shot at 18 yards, undershot him. And I come back in here this evening, and there's 2 different deer that I was looking at, him being one of them. And I had one shooter just circle my stand all night, just never would commit to the setup. And this clown come in here about 20 minutes before dark, and again put on a pretty good show. Worked some magic on another little 2-year-old deer in there, and sent him packing. And right at last light, I stuck one right through that shoulder. He was kind of quartering to me just a little bit. I know that's not the most ideal shot, but I was pretty confident in my setup, and I think knowing what your setup will and won't do is pretty important. I knew I could put it through that shoulder, and I did. And went back and reviewed the footage just to make sure. Called a good buddy of mine, Jeremy Moore. He come out, and you know, a solid 4.5-year-old deer here in West Virginia, and that finishes me up for the year. In West Virginia anyways. You know, had a good experience in Idaho this year with an elk hunt, and this is the 3rd Pope and young deer we put on the ground here in West Virginia this year. I might toy with the idea of going to a high there late season, but I am tickled. I'm very tickled, and I tell you what, I hate that it's come to an end, because you know, now I got to wait another 9-10 months before season comes back in again. But it's been a good one. I can't thank everybody enough that's come along there with me this year. My wife's been real supportive. A lot of good friends here on the team, and we're good about helping each other out. Jeremy's always been the consummate team player, always just a phone call away. But we're gonna call it quits here for 2020 here in West Virginia.